We diving deep into the top 5 rarest and most valuable Roosevelt dimes. Imagine holding a tiny 10-cent coin that could be worth hundreds, thousands, or even millions of dollars. Yes, we're talking about the Roosevelt dime, one of the most collected coins in American history. While most people see just pocket change, coin collectors know there are hidden treasures hiding in plain sight. The 1967 Roosevelt dime. What makes this seemingly everyday coin so rare and so valuable is not just its age or design, but the incredible minting errors that slipped past the United States Mint and into the hands of the public. These mistakes transformed a coin worth 10 cents into a collector's dream, fetching astonishing prices at auction. Now, before we dive into why the 1967 Roosevelt dime has become such a standout piece of American coinage history, let's set the stage. The year 1967 was a time of change at the U.S. Mint. Just a year earlier, in 1965, the Mint had transitioned away from using silver in dimes and quarters, moving instead to a copper-nickel-clad composition. This change was made because the price of silver was rising, and continuing to strike coins in silver would have cost more than the coins were worth. So, starting in 1965, dimes, quarters, and half dollars began to appear in new clad versions, with silver reserved only for certain special strikes. One of the most famous errors for the 1967 Roosevelt dime is the double die variety. A double die occurs when the die used to strike the coin has been improperly manufactured, resulting in a doubling effect on the design. This doubling can appear in the lettering, the numbers of the date, or even in the facial features of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Collectors prize double dies because they are dramatic, visible errors that set a coin apart from all others. For the 1967 dime, examples showing strong doubling can be worth thousands of dollars. Another extremely valuable error involves off-center strikes. An off-center strike happens when the blank coin, called a planchet, is not properly seated in the press during minting. The result is a coin with part of the design missing or shifted dramatically off-center. While minor off-centers of a few percent aren't worth much, dramatic off-centers where only part of Roosevelt's portrait is visible can sell for staggering amounts. Collectors love these because each one is unique. No two off-center strikes are exactly the same. A well-preserved 1967 Roosevelt dime with a major off-center strike can easily soar past the $9,000 mark at auction. Then there are the broad strikes and wrong planchet errors. A broad strike happens when a coin is struck without the collar that normally holds the planchet in place, causing the design to spread out wider than usual. These errors are eye-catching and highly collectible, especially from the clad transition era of the late 1960s. Even more dramatic are wrong planchet errors, where a dime design is accidentally struck on a blank meant for another denomination. Imagine a Roosevelt dime design struck on a penny or a quarter planchet. These unusual minting accidents are extraordinarily rare, and when one surfaces, collectors will pay a fortune to add it to their collection. But perhaps the most famous and sought-after error involving the 1967 Roosevelt dime is the transitional error strike. As mentioned earlier, the Mint had stopped making silver dimes after 1964, switching to clad compositions in 1965. However, a few rare examples from 1967 are believed to have been accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets. These transitional errors are the holy grail for collectors because they should not exist. When authenticated, they prove that mistakes happened at the Mint during one of the most significant changes in U.S. coinage history. Owning such a coin is like holding a piece of minting history frozen in time. And when one comes up for sale, prices skyrocket $9,000, $12,000, and in some cases pushing $16,000 depending on condition and appeal. Now, let's talk about why condition plays such an important role in determining the value of a 1967 Roosevelt dime error. Like most collectible coins, the higher the grade, the more a coin is worth. Coins that have survived in mint state, with little to no wear, are extremely desirable. When certified by a grading service like PCGS or NGC, these coins carry added trust and prestige. A dramatic mint error combined with a high mint state grade can push the value into the 5-figure range, making it a once-in-a-lifetime find for collectors. One of the most elusive and mysterious coins in American history, the 1968 D-era Roosevelt dime. This little coin, often overlooked by millions of people every single day, has become the stuff of legends in the world of coin collectors. And today, we're going to unravel its fascinating history, the mistakes that made it so valuable, and why just a single example of this coin could change your life forever. So grab your seat, because once you hear what makes you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. The story begins in 1968, just 3 years before this rare coin was struck. The United States Mint was going through one of the most significant changes in its history. For decades, Roosevelt dimes had been made of 90% silver and 10% copper, but rising silver prices forced the government to switch to a cheaper composition. Starting in 1965, dimes were made with a copper-nickel-clad composition, a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers, just like the quarters and half dollars of that era. This change not only saved money, but it also set the stage for some of the most unusual and valuable minting errors in modern U.S. coinage. Now here's where the excitement skyrockets. A 1968 D Roosevelt dime with the right error can fetch between $20,000 and $30,000 at auction. That's not a typo. We're talking about a coin that most people wouldn't give a second glance to, selling for the price of a brand new car, or even more. In fact, some high-grade examples of these errors have shocked even the most seasoned collectors, shattering expectations and bringing in record-breaking bids. Collectors are especially drawn to error coins like the 1968 D because they tell a story. Think about it, mint errors happen in a highly controlled environment where machines are designed to churn out billions of identical coins. When something goes wrong, it means a split-second mechanical slip or a tiny oversight turned a regular coin into something extraordinary. Every 1968 D-era Roosevelt dime is like a fingerprint, unique and irreplaceable. That's why values climb so high. You're not just buying metal, you're buying history, rarity, and a mistake that should never have existed in the first place. Now, here's a fun twist. The Denver Mint in 1968 was under pressure to produce coins quickly and in massive numbers to meet the demands of a booming U.S. economy. With such high production speed, the chance of errors increased. And while most mistakes were caught and destroyed, some slipped through the cracks. Those survivors are the ones collectors dream about today. In a sense, every 1968 D-era Roosevelt dime is a survivor, a coin that escaped the mint's quality control and made its way into circulation, only to be rediscovered years later in a coin roll, a jar of change, or at a coin show table. Imagine the excitement of being the lucky person who spots one. You're at a flea market, digging through a box of old coins priced at 10 cents each, and suddenly you notice a 1968 D Roosevelt dime that looks different. Maybe the edge looks silver instead of clad, or the strike looks off. That little discovery could put thousands of dollars in your pocket. Stories like these are what keep treasure hunters and collectors motivated to keep searching. Over the years, coin grading services like PCGS and NGC have authenticated and graded some of these 1968 D-era Roosevelt dimes. In high mint state grades, especially those with dramatic errors, the values climb exponentially. A lower grade example might sell for a few $1,000s, but a pristine, high-grade silver transitional error from 1968 D can easily soar past $20,000, $25,000, or even approach $30,000 when collectors battle it out in an auction. The 1970-era Roosevelt dime, one of the most sought-after coins in modern U.S. numismatic history. And today, we're going to uncover its story, its hidden details, and why this tiny 10-cent coin has become such a massive treasure. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a handful of change, and spotting what looks like an ordinary dime. You toss it aside without a second thought, never realizing that one of the smallest coins in U.S. circulation could actually be worth a staggering fortune. That's right, hidden in plain sight. A single dime from 1970 with a unique error has shocked collectors and auction houses alike by reaching jaw-dropping prices. It's a reality that has made. The Roosevelt dime was first introduced in 1946, created to honor the late President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who passed away in 1945. Roosevelt had been an inspiration to the American people during some of the toughest times in the nation's history, guiding the country through the Great Depression and World War II. But what many people don't realize is that Roosevelt was also a strong supporter of the March of Dimes campaign, which worked to fight polio, a disease he personally suffered from. That connection made it fitting for the dime to carry his portrait. Since then, the Roosevelt dime has been struck every single year without fail, and for most people, it's just a common everyday coin. But in the world of collectors, not every dime is equal, and the 1970-era Roosevelt dimes, the year 1970 was a transitional time in coinage history. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, silver had been eliminated from dimes and quarters due to rising metal costs. By 1970, all Roosevelt dimes were struck on a copper nickel-clad planchet, making them cheaper to produce but still highly functional for circulation. However, it's exactly during these years of adjustment that errors slipped through the cracks, errors that turned ordinary pocket change into extraordinary treasures. And the 1970-era Roosevelt dime is one of the most astonishing examples of this phenomenon. So, what makes this coin so rare and valuable? The truth is, it's not just one type of error, it's a combination of minting mistakes and unusual conditions that give it extraordinary appeal to collectors. Some 1970 Roosevelt dimes were struck with off-center designs, where the portrait of Roosevelt or the reverse design doesn't align properly with the planchet. Others were double-struck, meaning they were hit by the dies more than once, leaving overlapping details that make the coin instantly recognizable as an error piece. Then there are those struck on the wrong planchet. An incredible accident where a Roosevelt dime was accidentally struck on a foreign coin blank or another denomination's planchet. These wrong planchet strikes are among the rarest and most valuable, with collectors willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars for a single example. Perhaps the most famous of all is the 1970 Roosevelt dime that was struck on a 1941 Canadian 10-cent silver coin planchet. Imagine the layers of rarity here. Not only is it a Roosevelt dime with an error, but it's also struck on an already collectible Canadian silver dime from decades earlier. This unique mistake has made headlines in numismatic circles, and when such pieces hit the auction block, they send shockwaves through the collecting community. That's where we see those record prices: $35,000, $40,000, even $44,000 for a single dime no larger than your thumbnail. Now, you may be wondering, how can you spot a valuable 1970-era Roosevelt dime if you happen to come across one in circulation or in a coin collection? The key is to look closely. Off-center strikes are obvious at first glance. The design will appear shifted, sometimes dramatically. Double strikes reveal themselves through ghostly outlines of letters or features that seem duplicated. Wrong planchet errors may be slightly smaller, thinner, or have a different weight than a normal dime, and their color might be off due to different metal content. For example, a dime struck on a silver planchet will shine differently compared to the copper nickel-clad version. These tiny details can mean the difference between a coin worth 10 cents and one worth tens of thousands of dollars. Let's talk about auction results, because this is where things get really exciting. Several examples of the 1970-era Roosevelt dime have gone up for sale over the years, and the numbers are astonishing. At major auction houses, error dimes from 1970 have realized prices that would make any coin collector's jaw drop. While common minor errors might sell for a few hundred or a couple $1,000s, it's the spectacular wrong planchet and double-struck varieties that fetch life-changing sums. One particularly rare example graded by a top certification company sold for around $35,000. Another reached $40,000. And the most sensational, with its incredible combination of factors, climbed to $44,000 at auction, stunning everyone in attendance. The story of the 1974 Roosevelt dime is one of those mysteries in American coin history that keeps collectors awake at night, and if you're watching this video right now, you're about to discover why one tiny little 10-cent coin has turned into a golden treasure worth tens of thousands of dollars. Imagine digging through your pocket change, expecting nothing more than the usual coins we all see every single day, and suddenly realizing that the dime sitting in your hand isn't just an ordinary Roosevelt dime at all. It's one of the most elusive error coins ever struck at the Denver Mint. Now let's rewind to 1974. The United States Mint was operating at full force, striking millions of coins across the country. The Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946 to honor the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had by then become one of the most widely circulated coins in America. By the mid-70s, people hardly even noticed these little coins anymore. They were just tools for vending machines, pay phones, and everyday purchases. But hidden among those millions of dimes struck in Denver in 1974 was something extraordinary. A mistake. A minting blunder so rare that only a handful of collectors. Now, let's talk about the money, because this is where jaws really drop. Normal 1974 Roosevelt dimes are basically worth face value unless you find one in pristine condition, in which case maybe a few dollars. But the error dimes? Those are a completely different story. Auction records reveal that examples of the 1974 Roosevelt dime struck on the wrong planchet have sold for anywhere between $50,000 and $57,000. In certain cases, depending on condition, demand, and sheer collector frenzy, they've even reached the unbelievable level of $60,000. That means a single dime, smaller than a paperclip, could be worth more than the average annual salary in America. Think about that for a moment. What would you do if you found one of these coins? Would you sell it right away and cash in on that $50,000 to $60,000 payday? Or would you hold on to it, knowing that with every passing year, its value could rise even higher as collectors fight over the chance to own one? The beauty of coins like the 1974 Roosevelt dime is that their story keeps growing. As more people learn about them, the demand skyrockets, and when demand rises against such limited supply, prices climb. That's why collectors are so passionate about errors. Each one is unique, each one tells a different story, and each one carries that thrilling possibility of hitting the jackpot. And here's the wildest part: these coins are out there, somewhere in circulation, in old collections, in forgotten drawers or boxes of loose change. There could be a 1974 Roosevelt dime error hiding in plain sight. You might have walked past one at a flea market, or maybe it's sitting in a jar of coins in your house right now. That's the thrill of coin collecting, it's treasure hunting for the modern age. Every coin has a story, but some stories are worth tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, with such high values comes the need for expert authentication. Not every odd-looking dime is going to be a genuine error. That's why grading companies like PCGS and NGC are so important. They examine these coins under microscopes, weigh them to the exact gram, and analyze the metal content to verify if it's truly a wrong planchet strike. When a grading company certifies a 1974 Roosevelt dime error, the value skyrockets because now buyers know it's the real deal. Without that certification, it's just speculation. But with it, you've got a coin that can headline an auction and change someone's life. The Roosevelt dime itself carries sentimental value too. Franklin Roosevelt, honored on the coin, was a beloved president who led America through the Great Depression and most of World War II. His connection to the dime comes from his strong support for the March of Dimes, a campaign to fight polio. When he passed away in 1945, the dime was chosen to carry his image as a tribute. So every Roosevelt dime already has a story of hope and resilience built into it. But when you add the extraordinary twist of a minting error, suddenly that story becomes one of legend. One of the most valuable error coins in American history, I'm talking about the 1975 era Roosevelt dime, a coin so rare that collectors are willing to pay shocking amounts. This is not just another dime story. This is a story about one of the most famous mistakes in modern US coinage, a mistake so rare that only 2 examples have ever been found. 2. Think about that. Out of billions of dimes that passed through hands, vending machines, and piggy banks, just 2 slipped through with this error. And both of them now stand as legendary treasures in the world of coin collecting. The 1975 era Roosevelt dime is a coin that sparks excitement every time its name is mentioned. To understand why, we need to go back in time to the mid-1970s, when the United States Mint was preparing coinage for everyday use. By this time, the Roosevelt dime had already been in circulation for nearly 30 years, having been introduced in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Every dime since then carried his portrait on the obverse and, crucially, a small mint mark to indicate where it was struck unless it came from the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally had no mint mark. Collectors and numismatists were stunned when the 1975 era Roosevelt dime was revealed. The excitement wasn't just because it was rare, it was because it was virtually unheard of. Proof coins are struck with such care that an error like this is almost impossible. But the reality is that even the most controlled environments can make mistakes, and this mistake turned into a treasure worth tens of thousands of dollars. Now let's talk about the value. When one of these 1975 era Roosevelt dimes first appeared at auction, collectors couldn't believe what they were seeing. Here was a proof dime with no S and only one known example at the time. Bidding wars erupted. Prices skyrocketed. What might have been worth only 10 cents in ordinary circumstances was now commanding over $66,000. That's $66,000 for a single dime. And the more time passed, the higher the values climbed. Another specimen appeared later, and once again, collectors went wild. The price reached nearly $70,000, and in some cases, the estimate for such a coin has stretched to $75,000. Think about that for a moment, a dime worth $75,000. Why such high values? It's simple rarity and demand. In the coin collecting world, rarity is king. And when you combine rarity with the historical significance of a coin, plus the excitement of a dramatic error, you get a recipe for astronomical prices. Only 2 examples are known. That means that if you own one, you are one of just 2 people in the entire world who can claim to hold this piece of numismatic history. That exclusivity is priceless to collectors. The mystique surrounding the 1975-era Roosevelt dime has grown over the decades. Collectors talk about it in hushed tones, as if it were a mythical treasure. It's become one of the most famous modern U.S. coin errors, mentioned alongside legends like the 1913 Liberty nickel or the 1804 silver dollar. And while those coins are from much earlier periods of American history, the 1975-era Roosevelt dime proves that even in the modern era, great rarities can still be created. Sometimes by accident. But let's dive a little deeper into what makes the 1975-era Roosevelt dime so special. First, the proof quality of the coin is remarkable. These coins were struck with highly polished dies on specially prepared planchets, resulting in mirror-like surfaces and crisp details. The absence of the S mint mark is immediately obvious to the trained eye, and it stands out like a beacon to collectors. Second, the sheer rarity means that grading and condition matter less than usual. Even if the coin shows the slightest imperfection, it doesn't detract from its value, because the rarity outweighs all else. That's why auction houses present these coins with such fanfare. They know the excitement they generate.